I wrote that show. And I got an Emmy for that show.
Carroll O'Connor couldn't stand him, not even close, and that tension would later shake up TV history in ways nobody saw coming. Long before fame, controversy, or unforgettable characters, O'Connor's life was already fueled by grit, pressure, and raw emotion. Born John Carroll O'Connor on August 2nd, 1924, in the Bronx, New York, his story didn't begin with privilege or comfort. It started in a world that showed no mercy. He grew up in a strict Irish-American household where discipline and education weren't optional. They were survival tools. The Great Depression hit hard, and those early struggles left permanent marks on how O'Connor saw the world. He learned fast how money divided people, how power could dominate a room, and how frustration always sat just beneath the surface waiting to explode. Those lessons never faded. They became his fire. Every role he played carried pieces of that reality. He didn't just act, he lived inside his characters. What audiences saw on screen came straight from experience, not imagination. After time at Wake Forest University and later the University of Montana, his education was put on pause when he joined the United States Merchant Marine during World War II. That chapter showed him what real pressure felt like. Long hours, no comfort, no breaks, no excuses. That experience changed him completely. It stripped life down to its core and forced him to understand people at their rawest. No masks, no safety nets. Authority, struggle, survival. These weren't ideas anymore. They were live moments burned into his memory. When O'Connor returned home after the war, he came back sharper, tougher, and hungry for meaning. He earned a degree in English, driven by his love for words, rhythm, and storytelling that hit straight to the gut. Language mattered to him. Every word had weight. For a while, he thought teaching might be his path, standing in front of a classroom, shaping minds. But something deeper kept pulling at him. The stage. Acting gave him a rush books and lectures never could. It forced him to face truth head on, no hiding behind theories or grades. Then came the boldest move of his young career. In the 1950s, O'Connor packed up and moved to Ireland, enrolling at University College Dublin. That decision changed everything. Living overseas immersed him in classical theater at its roots. He trained among performers who valued emotion over fame, passion over flash. Day after day, he studied hard, performed constantly, and sharpened his timing like a weapon. That time abroad taught him patience, control, and discipline. He learned how to command a stage without raising his voice, how silence could hit harder than shouting, how every pause mattered. When he returned to the United States, he wasn't chasing celebrity. He wanted respect. The 1960s were rough, non-stop hustling, small TV parts, minor film roles, and endless rejection. But none of it broke him. It hardened him. Carroll O'Connor believed his moment would come if he stayed real and never cut corners. Slowly, audiences began to notice. Especially in films like Cleopatra, 1963, something was building, and nobody realized yet that television was about to change forever. Roles like, "What did you do in the war, Daddy?" in 1966 and Point Blank in 1967 proved one thing fast. Carroll O'Connor could switch lanes without blinking. 1 minute deadly serious, the next razor-sharp funny. He refused to be boxed into a single style. O'Connor could do it all, and he made damn sure people noticed, without begging for approval. Recognition didn't come easy, though. It crept toward him slow, while frustration stayed right on his heels. For years, he watched others break through while he kept grinding, waiting for the moment that would finally crack everything wide open. And then, the 1970s hit and everything flipped. That's when O'Connor landed the role that would brand his name into TV history forever. Archie Bunker. From 1971 to 1979, All in the Family wasn't just a sitcom, it was a cultural earthquake. Archie wasn't polished, polite, or politically careful. He was loud, stubborn, working class, and straight out of Queens. Archie Bunker said what a lot of Americans thought but never dared to say out loud. He carried the confusion, pride, fear, and frustration bubbling under the surface of a changing country. The show went straight for topics most networks dodged: race, gender roles, politics, generational clashes, all of it. Most actors would have sprinted away from a role that risky. O'Connor leaned in. He refused to turn Archie into a cheap joke or a one-note villain. Instead, he gave him layers, a hard shell, flashes of vulnerability, and contradictions that made him painfully human. Viewers didn't always like Archie, but they recognized him. He looked like their uncle, their dad, their neighbor down the block. And that's why it hit so hard. People laughed at Archie, laughed with him, then argued about him over dinner tables across America. That uneasy balance between humor and discomfort was pure O'Connor genius. He wasn't just entertaining, he was forcing people to think. Archie Bunker became a mirror for society, and O'Connor proved himself one of the boldest, most fearless actors TV had ever seen. All in the Family flipped television upside down. It didn't just entertain, it challenged. The show tackled racism, women's rights, the Vietnam War, and money struggles that hit close to home for millions. O'Connor's raw, unfiltered performance earned him 4 Primetime Emmy Awards and locked his place among TV royalty. When Archie moved into Archie Bunker's place from 1979 to 1983, O'Connor stretched the character even further, proving Archie's story and his own talent still had plenty to say, but O'Connor wasn't about to let one role define him forever. In the late 1980s, he shocked fans again, this time transforming into Chief Bill Gillespie on In the Heat of the Night from 1988 to 1995. Gone was the loudmouth from Queens. Now he played a thoughtful, evolving Southern police chief learning about justice, equality, and change in a tense, divided town. The role showed a softer, wiser O'Connor, still powerful, but layered with empathy and growth. And behind the scenes, he leveled up even more, stepping in as producer and writer. He proved his control went way beyond acting. His leadership turned the show into a long-running hit and cemented his legacy as a full-blown storytelling powerhouse. But one of the most emotional chapters of O'Connor's life didn't happen on TV at all. It started years earlier, back in 1962, while he was filming Cleopatra in Rome. And it would change him forever. Amid the massive sets, legendary stars, and pure Hollywood chaos, Carroll O'Connor and his wife, Nancy Fields O'Connor, made a quiet decision that changed their lives forever. Away from the flashing lights and big egos, they adopted a 6-day-old baby boy, naming him Hugh, in honor of Carroll's late brother, who had passed just a year earlier. That single choice peeled back the tough TV image and revealed the real man underneath. This wasn't about headlines or applause. It was about loyalty, love, and compassion, the kind that doesn't need cameras to exist. At a time when most stars were chasing the next big role or bigger paycheck, O'Connor sent a clear message. Family comes first. Bringing baby Hugh into their home blended joy with remembrance. His name wasn't just a tribute. It was personal, emotional, and deeply meaningful. Even while juggling demanding shoots across the globe, O'Connor never let fame overpower his most important role, being a father. Carroll lived by one unshakable belief: stability mattered more than status. Love mattered more than applause. That grounded mindset shaped how he raised Hugh in an industry built on make-believe. Hollywood was everywhere around them, but O'Connor made sure his son understood the real world first. Not privilege, not shortcuts, but effort. As Hugh grew older, the TV world naturally came into view, but nothing was handed to him. At just 17, Hugh landed a small but meaningful job as a courier on the set of Archie Bunker's place. No favors, no fast tracks. He earned it by showing up, learning the ropes, and putting in work, just like everyone else. For Carroll, this wasn't about connections, it was about values. He wanted his son to see that every person on a production mattered. From the camera crew to the actors, everyone deserved respect, responsibility, discipline, and humility. Those were the real markers of success in O'Connor's eyes. Hugh wasn't handed fame, he was handed expectations, and they were heavy. Carroll believed real lessons came from experience, not lectures. He made sure his son saw the long hours, the pressure, and the unpolished side of show business that fans never see. This wasn't favoritism. It was fatherhood mixed with mentorship. O'Connor poured the same intensity into raising his son that he brought to every role he played on screen. That philosophy carried forward years later when Carroll created the role of Officer Lonnie Jameson on In the Heat of the Night, a role written specifically for Hugh. But this wasn't about hype or shortcuts. It was a father opening a door, then stepping back. Carroll stayed close enough to guide, but far enough to let Hugh prove himself. That was his version of trust. He knew how brutal the entertainment world could be, the criticism, rejection, and pressure that could wear anyone down. By keeping Hugh within reach, O'Connor hoped to offer guidance without control, support without force, and opportunity without entitlement. It was a lesson he believed in with everything he had, because real strength, real success, and real legacy don't come from fame. They come from character. That balance said everything about Carroll O'Connor's values: love mixed with realism, support wrapped in tough lessons. He didn't want life handed to his son like a script. He wanted Hugh to earn his confidence, find his own voice, and stand on his own feet as both a man and an artist. It was one of those rare Hollywood stories where family and career blended with real heart until everything changed on March 28, 1995. That was the day tragedy struck. Hugh's long struggle with personal challenges came to a heartbreaking end, and Carroll O'Connor's world shattered in a way no award, no role, no standing ovation could ever prepare him for. Losing a child left a silence heavier than any closed curtain or empty set, a pain that never truly loosened its grip. The people closest to him saw the change immediately. His sharp wit was still there, but now it carried weight, a quiet sadness living underneath every word. Fame couldn't protect him. Success couldn't numb the ache. The loss rewired the rhythm of his entire life. But O'Connor didn't disappear. Instead of hiding, he turned pain into purpose. He stepped into a new role, not on screen, but in real life, speaking out for the Partnership for a Drug-Free America. And when he spoke, people listened. Not because he preached, but because he spoke as a father who had lived the nightmare firsthand. He talked openly about what it's like to watch someone you love struggle. The fear, the helplessness, the constant worry that never shuts off. His words weren't polished or performative. They were raw, honest, and human. He wanted people to understand that addiction doesn't care who you are. Fame, money, and success don't shield anyone from it. For the rest of his life, O'Connor pushed for awareness, compassion, early support, and real conversations, not whispers. This chapter revealed a depth that went far beyond acting. It showed a man willing to turn personal heartbreak into something that might save someone else. Still, even with all that growth, Carroll O'Connor never lost one core trait. He stayed unfiltered. If he didn't like someone, he didn't fake it. No soft talk, no pretending. And his feelings toward Rob Reiner, who played Michael Meathead Stivic on All in the Family, were anything but subtle. In interviews and private conversations, O'Connor made it crystal clear their relationship was rocky from day one. He once said bluntly, "I've never hated anyone as much as I hated Rob Reiner." That wasn't a joke. It was frustration that burned through the entire run of the show and never really cooled off. This wasn't a typical on-set disagreement, it ran deep. O'Connor believed their clashing personalities, egos, and completely different acting styles created non-stop tension behind the scenes. He felt Reiner disrupted the balance and mutual respect the cast needed to keep everything running smoothly. Later on, O'Connor explained that a big part of the issue was what he saw as Reiner's overconfidence. He once said, "Rob always thought he was smarter than everyone else, especially when the show leaned hard into its political themes." That belief only poured gasoline on an already fiery dynamic, and the tension between them would become legendary in its own right. That attitude crossed the line fast, from confidence straight into superiority, and Carroll O'Connor took it personally. This wasn't just about how scenes were played, it was the non-stop pushback, the constant questioning of creative choices, and the way Rob Reiner seemed to challenge authority at every turn. O'Connor saw it as arrogant and draining, and he believed none of it was accidental. It felt intentional. It was a personality clash that never let up, and yet here's the twist. O'Connor never let his resentment wreck the work. He stayed locked in, delivered powerhouse performances, and somehow flipped all that off-screen tension into electric on-screen chemistry. Ironically, that rivalry helped fuel some of All in the Family's most unforgettable moments. Scenes so charged, audiences could feel the fire through the TV. For Carroll O'Connor, the drama didn't stop when the cameras cut. It lived right behind them. To him, Rob Reiner wasn't just a co-star with a different opinion, he was a full-on disruption to the balance of the set. O'Connor felt Reiner constantly tested boundaries, strained professionalism, and threw off the rhythm between cast and crew. The tension didn't fade when filming wrapped, it lingered. And it wasn't only about creative clashes, it was deeper, personal. What bothered O'Connor most was the total lack of connection. While the rest of the cast bonded through long days, shared laughs, and leaned on each other through the grind, O'Connor felt Reiner stayed distant, cold, detached, and emotionally unreachable. He later admitted flat out, "There was never a moment when I felt like Rob was my friend." That one sentence said everything. The divide wasn't just professional, it was human. O'Connor believed Reiner was always trying to prove something, like every scene was a silent competition for control or spotlight. Instead of teamwork, the energy shifted into subtle rivalry, and it drained the room. O'Connor felt he had to constantly defend not only Archie Bunker's soul, but his own reputation as a serious actor. What once felt like a creative family started feeling like a quiet battleground where every take carried extra tension. He described their exchanges as stiff and uneasy, especially during long shooting days and heated creative debates. In O'Connor's eyes, what should have been collaboration turned into a tug of war that left scars on an otherwise legendary show. Even the smallest disagreement could blow up. Reiner's tone, posture, and approach turning quick talks into tense standoffs. But the clash ran deeper than personalities. It was a philosophical divide neither man could bridge. Archie Bunker was complex, flawed, and deeply human, and O'Connor guarded that depth like a bulldog. He believed Archie needed subtlety, emotion, and truth. Reiner, meanwhile, played Michael Stivic with sharp satire and heavy ideology, something O'Connor felt stripped away the emotional balance. To him, the back and forth stopped feeling like acting and started feeling like constant moral lectures. And that difference in vision, it kept the tension alive, scene after scene, long after the cameras stopped rolling. O'Connor once made it crystal clear. This was never just about acting. To him, it felt like Rob Reiner was trying to teach him a lesson every single day, and that burned him up. He grew fed up with what he saw as preaching instead of performing, and he said it flat out. "I am an actor, not a preacher." That one line summed up everything. O'Connor wanted truth, grit, and heart, not lectures wrapped in superiority. Their scenes turned into battles of perspective, not just Archie versus Meathead, but artist versus artist. Two totally different philosophies colliding head-on. And even with all that tension simmering behind the scenes, O'Connor never let bitterness poison the work. His professionalism never cracked, not once. Instead, he channeled that raw energy straight into the performance, making their on-screen chemistry feel electric, volatile, and unforgettable. That tension between Archie and Meathead felt real because some of it was real. You could feel it in every pause, every glare, every raised voice. And even as years passed and careers moved on, O'Connor never softened his stance. Late in life, he openly admitted his dislike for Reiner still stood unmatched. Carroll O'Connor didn't sugarcoat a thing. He once said, "I've worked with many people I couldn't stand, but Rob topped them all." And he meant it. That wasn't sarcasm or a flashy soundbite. That was raw honesty, delivered without hesitation. That mix of truth and contradiction defined O'Connor perfectly. On screen, audiences loved him as Archie Bunker, loud, stubborn, flawed, and somehow impossible to ignore. Off screen, he was something else entirely, a fiercely protective artist who refused to bend his integrity for anyone. That kind of determination created tension, sure, but it also fueled the fire that made All in the Family legendary. The friction was real, and maybe that's exactly why the show hit so hard. The passion, the clashes, the discomfort, it all existed both on screen and behind it. O'Connor brought truth into comedy, making people laugh while forcing them to think. That balance? Very few have ever pulled it off. Yet behind that sharp humor and fearless presence, O'Connor carried his own quiet struggles. On June 21st, 2001, in Culver City, California, Carroll O'Connor passed away at 76 after years of serious health challenges. While his final moments came from medical complications, his legacy never weakened for a second. Those closest to him said, even as his body failed, his mind stayed sharp, his wit stayed alive, and his love for storytelling never faded. Carroll O'Connor's portrayal of Archie Bunker didn't just change television, it redefined it forever. He mastered the art of mixing humor with uncomfortable truth. Through Archie Bunker, he tackled class, politics, and cultural change with a boldness TV had never seen before. Few characters have sparked as much conversation or mirrored society's divisions so honestly. After his passing, tributes poured in from every corner of the industry. Actors, writers, producers, all praising not just his talent, but his courage. The guts it took to play a character who didn't comfort audiences, but challenged them to look harder and think deeper. Archie Bunker was never easy, and neither was Carroll O'Connor. And that's exactly why both will never be forgotten. And that realness never faded, not for a second. Every line, every pause, every stare came from a man who refused to sugarcoat life. Carroll O'Connor brought truth to the screen whether people were comfortable with it or not, and that commitment followed him all the way to the end. When O'Connor was laid to rest at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery, surrounded by Hollywood legends, it felt right. That place didn't just reflect fame, it reflected respect, the kind earned through decades of fearless work and artistic guts. And in a deeply moving choice, his gravestone also carries the name of his son, Hugh. forever linking father and son in memory. That single detail said everything: love, loss, loyalty. The monument doesn't just mark a legendary career. It stands as a symbol of devotion and resilience that outlived fame, controversy, and pain. Carroll O'Connor's life was full of passion, conflict, and truth. On screen and off. His work didn't just make people laugh, it made them see. And that's why his legacy still sparks conversation and respect long after All in the Family ended. And the tension between Carroll O'Connor and Rob Reiner, that never disappeared. It didn't explode. It simmered. Quiet. Constant. Like a spark always waiting to flare up. Anytime their names came up in interviews, that old friction bubbled back to the surface, proof that time doesn't always smooth rough edges. O'Connor never pretended they'd buried the hatchet. If anything, he believed that clash was part of what gave the show its raw realism. He once hinted that working with Reiner felt like acting inside a storm. Unpredictable, loud, chaotic, but unforgettable. That line nailed it. Behind the scenes, insiders remembered how rehearsals could turn tense in seconds. One offhand comment about a script or scene could spark hours of heated back and forth. O'Connor valued discipline, structure, and control. Reiner leaned into spontaneity and ideology, bringing personal beliefs into discussions O'Connor felt belonged in the writer's room, not on set. Still, that friction created something powerful. Neither man could deny it. The electricity between Archie and Meathead wasn't just great writing, it was real energy colliding head-on. Two men who couldn't see eye to eye, yet somehow pulled the best out of each other. Viewers felt that edge, the tension, the unpredictability, and they loved it. In later years, Reiner spoke warmly about O'Connor's talent, calling him a true powerhouse. O'Connor, though, never returned that warmth. He respected Reiner's skill, but forgiveness? That wasn't required. To O'Connor, professionalism didn't mean friendship, it meant honesty. And he never faked that for anyone, ever. What started as a sitcom rivalry became one of Hollywood's most fascinating behind-the-scenes stories. Pride, passion, two powerful personalities who refused to bend. Time gave them distance, but never peace. And whenever documentaries or interviews revisited All in the Family, that same spark lit back up again. Almost like neither man could ever fully escape the shadow of what they built together. Something explosive, unforgettable, and bigger than both of them. Rob Reiner went on to become a respected filmmaker, stacking praise for his directing and storytelling like trophies on a shelf. But no matter how successful he became, conversations about his early acting days always circled right back to Carroll O'Connor. Reporters couldn't help themselves. They brought up the on-set clashes again and again. Reiner usually laughed it off, brushed it aside like old noise. But O'Connor, his responses were sharper, colder, and packed with truth that stung. For him, those memories came with pride mixed with exhaustion. He respected what All in the Family achieved, but he never forgot the friction it took to make it happen. Those creative battles with Reiner became a strange, invisible ingredient in the show's success. Something you couldn't write into a script, something that made Archie and Meathead feel so painfully real. The tension wasn't fake, it was alive. The two men never shared a moment of reconciliation. No quiet meeting, no emotional clearing of the air. O'Connor didn't chase closure. He didn't believe in rewriting history just to make it sound cleaner or easier. Insiders said that whenever Reiner's name came up around O'Connor, his tone shifted. Not with rage, but with finality. He'd say very little, but the silence said everything. That chapter was closed in his mind. Their relationship defined one of the greatest eras in television history. And maybe that was enough. It didn't need a happy ending to stay legendary. In the end, their conflict proved something powerful. Great art doesn't always come from harmony. Sometimes it's born from resistance, pride, and two unstoppable forces colliding under blinding studio lights. By the late 90s, the tension between Carroll O'Connor and Rob Reiner had become full-blown Hollywood legend. People whispered about it on studio lots, still wondering if the two ever made peace. The truth? They didn't. The wound wasn't explosive anymore. It was quiet and deep, like an old scar that never fully healed. Reiner occasionally spoke about O'Connor in interviews, calling him complicated and crediting him for shaping one of the most powerful characters in TV history. O'Connor's responses stayed distant, polite, and guarded. When asked about Reiner, he rarely offered more than a short answer. Calm, controlled, and edged with finality. Those close to him said he saw no reason to fake warmth. For Carroll, honesty mattered more than diplomacy. Still, even he couldn't deny the truth. That storm between them created magic. The heat of their disagreements gave All in the Family its spark, a raw energy no script could ever manufacture. Decades later, fans could still feel that chemistry crackling through every argument between Archie and Meathead. Those fights weren't just acting. They were real emotion sharpened into art. In private, O'Connor admitted that working with Reiner pushed him harder, made him sharper, forced him to dig deeper into Archie's complexity, but respect didn't mean forgiveness. Old clashes stayed exactly where they were. For Carroll O'Connor, it was always about truth. Whether that truth made people laugh, uncomfortable, or squirm in their seats. And in the end, the O'Connor-Reiner feud became more than simple dislike. It became a symbol of the creative fire that powered an era of fearless, no-holds-barred television. It was a time when conflict didn't destroy art, it powered it. That tension didn't weaken the work, it lit it up. And through that constant friction, two men unknowingly helped build one of the most unforgettable legacies television has ever seen. Even after Carroll O'Connor's passing, the echoes of his feud with Rob Reiner never faded. They lingered like unfinished dialogue from a heavy scene, the kind that stays with you long after the screen cuts to black. Fans, journalists, even former castmates kept debating what really went down between the two men who turned All in the Family into a cultural lightning bolt. Some said the rivalry was strictly creative, two artists butting heads. Others swore it was personal, a clash of pride that never found peace. The truth sat somewhere in between. Both men carried fire, just aimed in different directions. O'Connor lived for authenticity. Every line had to land. Every moment had to mean something. Reiner, younger and outspoken, pushed ideas hard, always chasing a bigger message behind the laughs. Those two forces couldn't exist quietly in the same space, but together, they reshaped television forever. After O'Connor was gone, Reiner spoke respectfully, calling him one of the best actors I've ever worked with. His tone felt sincere, maybe even heavy with regret. Still, O'Connor's earlier words left their mark, proof that the tension never truly cooled on either side. Pride was stitched into both of them, and pride doesn't bend easy. Industry insiders used to say the irony was almost poetic. Two men who couldn't agree behind the scenes created some of the most honest, electric moments TV had ever delivered. Their creative war became part of television history. Even now, decades later, fans can feel that energy when they watch reruns. The laughs hit different once you know the truth. Behind every argument and punchline were two strong-willed men locked in a quiet fight for respect, and that's why the show still feels alive today. As time passed, the legend of their behind-the-scenes tension only grew. New generations discovered All in the Family and felt that same spark, the kind that made every clash between Archie and Meathead explode with real heat. What most never realized was that the realism came straight from real-life friction. They respected the work, but they never fully respected each other. Writers and producers who were there remembered it clearly. The set wasn't hostile, but it was charged. Like static in the air before a storm, every rehearsal carried that edge. Calm day or collision, you never knew. O'Connor demanded discipline and precision. Reiner thrived on risk and spontaneity. Those opposing styles clashed non-stop, but they also made the scenes feel alive, like two worlds colliding in real time. And in the end, people close to O'Connor said he didn't dwell in bitterness, but he never softened either. That was Carroll O'Connor. Real to the end, unbending, and forever tied to a legacy built not from comfort, but from truth and fire. When Rob Reiner's name came up, Carroll O'Connor didn't rant or explode anymore. He'd nod, give a tight little smile, and switch the subject fast. It wasn't anger by then, it was acceptance. The kind that comes when you realize some relationships are never meant to get closure, and forcing it would only cheapen the truth. Reiner, meanwhile, carried his own reflections. Over the years, he openly credited O'Connor's intensity for pushing him to sharpen up, not just as an actor, but as a storyteller. He admitted that working opposite O'Connor forced him to think faster, dig deeper, and raise his game every single time. That's the strange truth about their feud. It was toxic and transformative at the same time. It burned hot, but it built something massive. Without that creative collision, All in the Family might have faded into just another sitcom. Instead, it became a cultural lightning strike. Their tension wasn't a flaw. It was fuel, raw, uncomfortable, but unforgettable. Even decades after the show ended, the friction between Carroll O'Connor and Rob Reiner still sparks fascination. It feels like an unsolved Hollywood mystery. Every anniversary special, every documentary, every retrospective, that undercurrent of rivalry bubbles right back up. A reminder that the magic on screen was powered by real, unfiltered emotion. The laughs were real, but so were the clashes, and that duality is what made the series impossible to forget. O'Connor represented old-school craft, discipline, emotional control, respect for structure, no shortcuts. Reiner came from a new wave, bold, political, outspoken, and hungry to shake the system. To O'Connor, Reiner's style felt reckless. To Reiner, O'Connor's discipline felt rigid, fire and steel, loud, bright, and impossible to ignore. Crew members used to joke they could predict the entire day just by watching their first exchange. A quick nod meant smooth sailing. A sigh or side-eye meant trouble was loading up fast. Still, neither man let that tension wreck the work. They cared too much about the show. They fought hard, acted harder, and walked away from every scene knowing something special had just been created, even if it came with bruised pride and clenched jaws. Looking back, that conflict became the show's heartbeat. It added grit, edge, and a level of realism no script alone could manufacture. Viewers didn't always realize it, but what they were watching wasn't just performance, it was truth wrapped in comedy. The O'Connor-Reiner feud remains one of television's sharpest contradictions, proof that sometimes the brightest brilliance comes from tension that refuses to fade. And there it is, the untold story behind one of television's most legendary rivalries. Carroll O'Connor and Rob Reiner didn't just create characters, they sparked a cultural earthquake that changed TV forever. Their chemistry was explosive, their clashes unforgettable, and their impact still shaking screens decades later. Every time All in the Family lights up in reruns, you can feel it. O'Connor's raw power, Reiner's fiery edge, a battle of pride, passion, and belief that gave birth to something extraordinary. Their tension wasn't just behind-the-scenes drama, it was the secret ingredient that made every face-off between Archie and Meathead feel real. That wasn't scripted emotion. That was raw truth turned into television history. And even now, that energy hasn't faded one bit. It reminds us of a hard truth. Greatness doesn't always come from harmony. Sometimes it's forged in the heat of creative conflict where egos collide and art gets sharper because of it. Carroll O'Connor's legacy lives on far beyond the laughs. It lives in the honesty he demanded, the courage he showed, and the fearless performances that refused to play it safe. He didn't just entertain. He challenged, provoked, and changed the game. If you made it this far, you already know. This story deserves to be remembered and talked about. So, if you enjoyed uncovering the real tension behind All in the Family, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with anyone who loves classic TV legends. And now it's your turn. Drop a comment below. Do you think their feud helped turn the show into a masterpiece? Or did it push things too far? Let's keep the conversation alive and keep celebrating the moments, the conflicts, and the genius that shaped television forever. Thanks for watching. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss the next deep dive into Hollywood's most fascinating stories.